Hello friends, welcome to UGC EPG Pathshala. Myself Dr. Chandri Banerjee, Assistant Professor, Department of Geography, BSR Government Arts College, Alwar, Rajasthan. And I shall speak on the early origins of geographical thinking with special reference to Varenius and Kant, which is part of the paper Geographical Thought. We shall proceed with the following objectives in mind. We need to trace the development of geographical discourse following the Renaissance. Then we need to learn about the contribution of Bernhard Varenius in furthering the discipline of geography. We need to develop an understanding of the nature of the advancement that took place in the subject of geography in the 18th century. And finally, to learn about the contributions made by Immanuel Kant in the field of geography. To begin with, we shall discuss about the Renaissance and the beginning of scientific geography. The Renaissance laid the foundation of scientific geography in the early 17th century, as it was a period of voyages and explorations and inventions that cleared several prevalent earlier geographical misconceptions through new information that flooded in at this time. Hence, this was the beginning of the pre-classical period of modern geography that continued through the 18th century as well. Several conceptual developments took place at this time, and the most notable among them were the laws of motion by the German astronomer Johannes Kepler in 1618, the acceptance of Copernicus's concept of a heliocentric universe by Galileo in 1623, who also tried to describe the universe in terms of mathematical laws in contrast to the teleological concept of Aristotle, the law of gravitation by Isaac Newton in 1686. Hence, Kepler, Galileo and Newton sowed the seeds of scientific revolution that marked the beginning of specialization in any domain of knowledge. However, a major problem faced by contemporary scholars was to relate specific pieces of information to general principles. Hence, this was also the period which gave rise to dualism and dichotomies in geography, which are prevalent even today. At the same time, there were some efforts to revive the tradition of Greek and Roman periods. This was very much evident in the works of Peter Apian, Sebastian Münster or Philip Clover, all of whom maintained the concept of a geocentric universe. Peter Apian supported the Aristotelian concept of the ecumen or the zone of habitability. Sebastian Münster, known for his work Cosmographia Universalis, followed the classical Roman tradition of historical geography and totally excluded mathematical and physical geography in his work. Philip Clover, who carried forward the same tradition as Münster, was the first German geographer to formulate universal geography and at the same time made significant contributions in regional geography. His famous work was named Introduction in Universum Geographium. He also made a distinction between geography and chorography. The most significant contribution during this period was, however, made by Bernhard Varenius, which influenced the geographical discourse for more than a century. Bernhard Varenius was born in 1622 near Hamburg in Germany. He studied philosophy, mathematics and physics at the University of Hamburg between 1640 and 1643. Thereafter, he moved to the University of Königsberg to study medicine and then to Leiden for the same. Varenius renewed the mathematical tradition in geography. In fact, he was so impressed with the mathematical works of Kepler, Galileo and Newton that he vehemently criticized those who reduced geography to a mere description of countries. He may be credited for pioneering several developments in the subject matter of geography. To start with, he was one of the first scholars to highlight on the differences in the nature and content of physical and human geography, though he himself was not much interested in the latter, that is human geography, since human geography could not be subjected to mathematical laws and thus generate universal principles. He believed that the methods of the natural sciences could be successfully used to draw conclusions about natural phenomena with a precision to a considerable extent. But they cannot be applied to human groups because they are more subject to probability than certainty. Generalizations regarding human groups should be restricted to a particular space and time. Using the terms of Bartholomew Keckermann, who was a German philosopher, Varenius partitioned geography into special geography that was essentially concerned with the description of particular places on the basis of direct observations. This branch of geography was assumed to have great practical importance for governance and commerce. Another branch was general geography that was based on universally applicable mathematical or astronomical laws. Hence, Varenius's contribution eventually gave rise to the dualisms between physical and human geography, and more importantly, between regional and systematic geography, though he asserted that they were mutually interdependent branches of geography. Varenius stressed the fact that special geography provided the database based on which general geography could infer the general hypothesis and laws. Varenius was the first to describe the differences in the amount of insolation received at different latitudes on the earth, and pointed out that the highest temperatures on the earth are recorded in the hot deserts of the tropics and not in the equatorial belt. He was indeed one of the first to explain the world's wind systems by stating that the air masses close to the equator gets heated up and thins out to be replaced by cold and heavy air masses from the polar regions. In 1649, Varenius wrote his first book, Description Reni Laponie et Siam, that is, the regional description of Japan and Siam, or Thailand. It was an outcome of his interaction with the Dutch traders who were engaged in international trade while residing at Amsterdam with an assignment of a private tutor. Amsterdam was then the commercial hub of Netherlands, while Nagasaki in Japan was a Dutch trading post. The book of Varenius comprised 5 parts. First part dealing with the description of Japan, then the description of Siam or Thailand that was being translated into Latin, a description of the religions of Japan, then some information on the religions of Africa, and finally a short essay on the governments dealing with places and people. This book was followed by another exclusive volume on the religions of Japan. However, Varenius's most significant contribution was his book Geographia Generalis that was published in 1650, and it was one of the first attempts to combine 3 branches of geography, namely general geography, mathematical geography, and physical geography, and chorology as a science of space. The book consisted of 3 parts: the absolute or the terrestrial part dealing with the shape and size of the earth, as well as physical geography of continents, seas, and the atmosphere; the relative or the cosmic part describing the relation between the earth and other celestial bodies, especially the sun, and its effect on global climate; and the comparative part focusing on the principles of navigation and the location of different places in relation to each other. In the preface of Geographia Generalis, Varenius advocated that the description of particular places should take into consideration the celestial conditions like climate, the terrestrial conditions like relief, soil, vegetation, and biotic life, and finally human conditions like population, settlement, trade, forms of government, and so on. Varenius's Geographia Generalis could have had a second volume, but it could not be completed owing to his untimely and premature death in 1650. This book was translated into several editions in Latin. Therefore, the main advancements that was made in the field of geography in the 17th century were, number 1, the discovery of new places and more precision in the art of map making. In this case, special mention may be made about Gerardus Mercator, who developed his projection based on the true azimuth or bearing of places on the Earth's surface. That was of great help in navigation purposes. The development of general or systematic geography. The period following Varenius had no conspicuous advancement in scientific geography for almost a century. However, there were some interim scholars who made different contributions in the field of geography. Now, coming to the development of geography in the 18th century. The 18th century witnessed a shift in interest for the natural sciences based on empirical knowledge that provided a more scientific description of the Earth's surface than ever before and paved the way for several new advancements in geography. Catastrophism as an explanation for landform evolution was replaced by the concept of uniformitarianism propounded by the Scottish geologist James Hutton. This concept stated that the geomorphic processes operating today also operated in the past, and these were responsible for the visible landforms on the Earth's surface. The concept of graded profile that was developed by Louis Gabriel Comte de Ban of France which stated that there was a state of equilibrium between the velocities of the flowing water and the river and the load carried by it, the load of alluvium carried by it, also came in. The key geographical developments of this period may be summarized as rise of political statistical approach in geography, rise of Rhine or pure geography, development of practical and scientific methods, foundation of a philosophical base in geography. And some of the prominent scholars or the geographers of this period who prevailed in 18th century were Comte de Buffon, then we have who introduced the concept of historical naturalism. There was a Forster duo like Johann Reinhold Forster and his sons Johann George Forster, who pioneered a scientific and practical approach in geography. The father-son duo accompanied Captain Cook on his second voyage in 1772 to 75, during which they carried out botanical observations that enabled them to offer generalizations accompanied with causal explanations. After returning, Reinhold Forster published a report titled Observations Made During a Voyage Round the World in 1778, which comprised of 6 sections on the earth and its lands, water and oceans, atmosphere, aerial differences, vegetation and animals, and the races of mankind. Forster may be regarded as the first methodological geographer of modern geography. His son, George Forster, was the first who identified the similarities between the West European and the West North American climate, as well as the temperature patterns on the eastern and western parts of the continents at the same latitude. The greatest advantage for the Forster duo was that they could collect information on their own and did not have to rely on the descriptions provided by others. Both of them were critical about the idea of climate influencing human life. During the early part of the 18th century, geography had a utilitarian characteristic for describing historical events or governments. But with the constant inflow of new information and empirical knowledge, soon it was able to overcome its subordinate position to history and emerge as an independent and interdependent science. And this marked the beginning of what is called Rhine geography or pure geography, in which the political units were replaced by natural or physical units to describe both land and people. The tradition of Rhine geography was mainly carried forward by the French geographer Philippe Buache and the German philosopher and geographer Anton Friedrich Busching. Buache, in his book published in 1756, formulated the concept that the earth is divided into several river basins that are surrounded by continuous ranges of mountains, which acts as drainage divide between 2 river basins, and even continue underneath the oceans as strings of islands or submerged sandbanks. His view may be easily exemplified by the rivers of Europe. Johann Christoph Gatter carried forward the views of Buache and identified river basins as natural regions. Busching was greatly influenced by the politico-statistical approach of his time and made extensive use of statistical materials in his famous work that was published in 1792. He used population density as a geographic element and may be credited for propounding the theory of economic interdependence between countries. Busching regarded water transportation as the cheapest mode of transport. Then H.G. Homeyer abandoned political boundaries altogether and divided the Earth's surface into terrains which were natural regions and mostly river basins. Following this, Johan August soon attempted to discover the interrelationship between human beings and the biotic life of an area. He sought to redefine the Earth's surface not only on the basis of relief but also on the basis of climate and vegetation. Scientific geography received a different orientation altogether from the philosophical standpoint provided by Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant was born in 1724 at Königsberg in East Prussia or Russia. Immanuel Kant was not only a great philosopher but also made immense contribution in the field of astronomy, geology and geography. But unlike Forster, Kant was considered as an armchair geographer because his interest in geography was not based on actual observations in different parts of the world. Kant's greatest contribution was that he laid the philosophical foundation of the discipline of geography by defining its nature, particularly its relation to the natural sciences. Immanuel Kant's major interests were in the discourses of philosophy, mathematics and natural sciences. Like Varenius, Immanuel Kant also spent several years, that is almost a decade from 1746 to 1755, as a private tutor with some affluent families of Königsberg after finishing his studies from the University of Königsberg itself. He was awarded with a PhD degree in 1755, following which Kant was appointed a lecturer at the University of Königsberg. Kant lectured with great proficiency not only in the fields of philosophy, mathematics, physics and mechanical sciences like mechanics, hydrostatics and hydrokinetics, but also in military sciences as well, like fortification and pyrotechnics. From 1756 to 1796, that is for a period of 40 years, Kant offered a regular course of lectures on physical geography. According to him, the study of geography was an essential approach to the empirical knowledge needed for his philosophical investigations. However, finding the subject to be inadequately developed, he devoted himself in accumulating and organizing information from a multitude of sources. At the same time, Kant also tried to concentrate on specific geographical problems like the deflection of winds due to Earth's rotation. In 1770, at the age of 46 years, Kant became the professor of logic and metaphysics at the same University of Königsberg, though he was offered this chair at the same post at the universities of Erlangen and Jena. But he refused those offers as he was not willing to leave Königsberg. Kant became a member of the Board of Governors in 1780 and in 1786 was assigned the chair of the Vice-Chancellor in the same University of Königsberg. Kant's early works like General Natural History and the Theory of the Heavens, that was published in 1755, did not have much to do with geography and was more related to speculative astronomy. It was the same even with his treatises that he produced on the earthquakes or the interior of the earth. However, geographical references were found in his later works such as Critic of Pure Reason and the Critic of Judgment. Kant's essay Anthropology from Pragmatic Point of View that came forth in 1798 also contained a vivid geographical description of the races and ethnic groups around the world. In his famous Critic of Pure Reason, Kant freed geography from its close bond with theology by rejecting the teleological concept. This put an end to the Aristotelian era in geography. Kant insisted that explanations for any phenomenon should be sought in chronologically antecedent events. He believed that geography of any place played a pivotal role in determining the progress of human civilization there. The physical geography, however, which Kant developed was essentially anthropocentric in nature and content. This is because, according to Kant, physical geography not only included the features visible on the Earth's surface that were created by the natural processes, but also by the human actions. And this viewpoint of Kant seemed to have been borrowed and conceived from Buffon's Histoire naturelle. And later, of course, this point of view was adopted by Karl Ritter. Kant opined that physical geography is the first part of knowledge of the world and is essential to develop our basic understanding of the earth as the abode of humans and for furthering philosophical studies. Empirical knowledge, according to Kant, could be obtained in two ways, either through pure reason or through the senses. Now, the senses again could be divided into the inner senses and the outer senses. The world is perceived by the inner senses was the soul or the seal or the man, while those perceived by the outer senses was nature. While anthropology, in this I would like to mention that anthropology was used as analogous for psychology, dealt with the soul or man, physical geography dealt with nature. Kant advocated that knowledge can be classified in two ways. The first was a logical classification that categorizes items on the basis of morphological similarities and may give rise to systematic sciences like zoology concerned with the animals, geology concerned with the rocks, or sociology concerned with the social groups. And then this physical classification that categorizes items as belonging to same time or space. In relation to this, Kant asserted that history differs from geography only in that while the former is related to time, the latter is related to space. History studies phenomena that follow one another and has reference to time, and hence they are chronological, whereas geography studies phenomena that are spread beside each other on space and hence are chronological. Since any individual's experience is restricted to a specific time and space, his knowledge has to be supplemented with the experiences of others. Such knowledge could be derived indirectly from the others and were classified into two types, one narrative and the other is the descriptive. While history is narrative, geography was the descriptive. Therefore, history and geography make up the entire gamut of empirical knowledge, the former dealing with time and the latter dealing with space. To be more precise, empirical knowledge may be classified according to space and time. When Kant was posed with the question that whether it was geography that came first or it was history, Kant resolved the question by asserting that both geography and history had existed in all periods simultaneously. In fact, geography is a subset of history. So if there had been an ancient history, there has also been an ancient geography as well, which in turn explain the events of history and physical geography. Physical geography concerned with nature not only constituted the foundation of history, but all plausible geographies. Regarding the concept of space, Kant pointed out in his Critique of Pure Reason that space is not something objective or real. Rather, it is any substance, but it is something which is subjective and essentially a mental construct. It is governed by an unchanging law and provides a kind of framework for coordinating things and events, all of which can be perceived with our outer senses. Immanuel Kant may rightly be regarded as a father of exceptionalism, as he was opposed to generalizations and believed that history and geography were methodologically different from the other sciences, as they were concerned with the study of the unique and the exceptional. Germany in the 19th century witnessed the emergence of what may be described as NeoKantianism. The followers of this tradition sought to draw a line or difference between the historical and the cultural sciences on one hand and the natural sciences on the other. This is supposed to have sowed the seeds for another dualism in the discipline of geography. That is the difference between physical and the human geography. They upheld that whereas natural sciences dealt with objects that can be sensed externally and thus be explained, the cultural and historical sciences dealt with those objects that were mainly the mental constructs and therefore needed to be understood first. Hence, while the former is concerned with the nomothetic, the latter is concerned with the ideographic. The dichotomy between the two approaches may be explicated as, while the ideographic or the empirical approach do not seek to develop laws, but mainly focus on the description of particular places in the context of their land, seas or places, and attempt to find its relation with other places, the nomothetic or deductive approach, on the other hand, seeks to establish laws relevant for a location and therefore and thereafter make deductions based on those laws. Apart from physical geography, Immanuel Kant may also be credited for pioneering several other branches of geography as well. He in fact divided geography into 5 major branches: mathematical geography, dealing with the shape, size, form and movements of the earth and its position in the solar system; moral geography, that describes the customs and traditions of humans in different places; political geography, which essentially studies the interrelationship between political units and their physical setup; commercial geography, which probes into the fact that why one country has abundance of some commodities but is deficient in others, and this is one situation which eventually gives rise to international trade. And finally, it's theological geography, which tries to analyze the changes, theological principles, experiences in different spatial units. Kant was of the view that since physical geography describes the natural composition of the earth and includes almost everything on it, that is the atmosphere, mountains, rivers, oceans, humans, plants, animals, representation of these by cartographic means is not important, and even if such maps existed, they should only be used for pedagogical purposes. Kant placed geography in a central position amongst the sciences which have been reiterated by geographers time and again. In human geography of modern times, the development of the possibilistic approach of the French school and humanistic geography may be attributed to Kantianism. The principles of Kant were systematically opposed, and his philosophical basis of the subject was almost forgotten until it was revived by Hettner and Hartshorne. It is true that in present time most of the disciplines have assumed an interdisciplinary character, with one transcending into another, and it is not possible anymore to draw clear-cut divisions or divide the subjects into watertight compartments as had been done by Kant. But in his period, most of the scholars of geography, knowingly or unknowingly, followed Kant by giving ultimate importance to the influence of humans in describing the physical features of the earth. To sum up, the contributions of the 18th century geographers were really commendable. The different viewpoints of geographical thinking that emanated, that is political, statistical or pure, not only brought the era of traditional thinking to a close, but also paved the way for fresh advances in the discourse. This in turn created the base on which the edifice of scientific geography was built in the next 5 decades. Thank you.